investigation ID I watch. Do you know how much true crime I watch? You can't get away with nothing. Jesus, there's cameras everywhere. My child is smarter than that.
A text message written by a 17-year-old boy sent to his girlfriend 10 days before he killed someone. He wasn't in a rage when he sent it. He wasn't in the moment. He was calm enough to type it out, read it back, and press send. His plan was already in motion. He had purchased the weapons. He had identified the location. He had assigned every role. All that remained was the day, and he had already chosen that too. The following Sunday, an 18-year-old named Dwight D.J. Grant Jr. walked toward that stairwell. He wasn't afraid. He had no reason to be. Someone he trusted was waiting at the bottom of those stairs. He never walked back out. His mother found out what happened before the police did. She pulled the security footage herself. She sat in front of a monitor in her own building and watched her son being attacked. She watched 3 figures disappear. She watched her son being dragged out of the frame. And then she walked outside and found him 10 feet from her front door, hidden in the bushes. Miramar, Florida, doesn't announce itself. It sits quietly in Broward County, pressed between the western edge of the Everglades and the Atlantic coast. Not a place that ends up in headlines. A place people choose deliberately. Immigrant families, working families, people who arrived in this country and looked at this city and decided this was where they were going to build something. Mageline Emile was one of those people. She raised her son Dwight here. She watched him grow from a child into a young man who still called her every night, not because she asked him to, because that was who he was. Dwight D.J. Grant Jr. had turned 18 in September 2021. He lived with his mother in Miramar and split time with his father, Dwight Grant Sr. He was a student at Miramar High School. By every account from people who knew him, he was the kind of person that made a room feel better when he walked in. Funny, kind, thoughtful. People called him an old soul. He didn't drink. He didn't get into trouble. He loved video games and computers, and he had a plan for his life. He was looking forward to what came after high school. Before we go any further, if you're someone who needs to understand why people do the things they do, you're exactly where you should be. This is the Malice Mind. Subscribe if you haven't already. Now, back to Dwight. On the morning of the 18th of October, 2021, Mageline Emile called Miramar Police Department and reported her son missing. He had last been seen the day before Sunday, October 17th. He was 18, which meant no Amber Alert. He was logged as a missing adult and the case opened. October 18th, Monday morning. Mageline Emile was not the kind of woman who would sit still while a system moved at its own pace. She went to the hospitals herself. She printed flyers with her son's photograph and got them into circulation. She tracked the phone numbers that had contacted Dwight's cell in the final hours before he disappeared. And because she knew her building, because she knew where the cameras were, she went to the apartment complex staff and asked them to pull the security footage from the day before. What she found on that monitor was something no parent should ever have to witness through a screen. She described seeing her son being attacked by what she believed were 2 men. She watched it happen. She could not stop it. The footage was from the day before. She reported it immediately. Officer Damaso Espirito Santo responded to the apartment complex and conducted a foot search of the area around that stairwell. What he found there ended the missing person case and opened a homicide investigation. Blood, significant amounts of it, evidence that someone had attempted to clean it, broken shrubbery, a footprint in the soil beneath the steps. Investigators continued the search of the property. What they found, a short distance away, partially concealed behind a cluster of bushes, steps from Mageline Emil's front door, was Dwight D.J. Grant Jr. He had not been brought here from somewhere else. He had been carried out of that stairwell and left. The medical examiner later confirmed 3 stab wounds, 1 to the back right of the neck, 1 to the torso, 1 to the abdomen. Multiple sharp force and blunt force injuries. Cause of death, blood loss. Manner of death, homicide. There were also signs he had fought back. Dwight D.J. Grant Jr. had been killed outside his own home. Who could have done this, and why was now the only question that mattered? Investigators had a body, a crime scene, and a surveillance system. The footage was studied frame by frame. 3 individuals had been present at the stairwell. 2 of them had prepared carefully dark clothing from head to toe, masks, nothing to identify them. The third had made no attempt to conceal herself. She was a young woman, no mask, 2 distinct blonde streaks set against otherwise dark hair, and she wasn't waiting inside the stairwell like the others. She was outside, visible, walking toward the building with Dwight. He was giving her a piggyback ride. That detail stopped investigators, not because it was unusual for teenagers, but because of what it meant in context. This was not a chance encounter. Dwight had no reason to be afraid of the person who brought him there. He trusted her completely. He was carrying her. She was the lure. The footage then showed the 2 masked individuals emerging from inside the stairwell. When Dwight recognized what was happening when the trap became visible, he tried to run. They pulled him back in. For the next 20 to 30 minutes, those 2 moved in and out of the stairwell. The young woman, with the blonde streaks, stayed on the outside, watching the perimeter, standing guard. When it was over, the footage showed Dwight's body being carried out, lifted over a railing, and dragged out of the camera's view. 3 suspects, all dressed alike, all gone. Investigators needed a name for the woman on camera. Mageline Emil had already done part of that work. Going through her son's phone records, she had tracked every number that had been in contact with Dwight in the hours before he disappeared. She had found one that stood out. She had called it herself. The person who answered was a 17-year-old girl named Christy Parisienne. Christy was a student at Miramar High. She had been the last person to contact Dwight before he disappeared. Investigators brought her in for questioning. What came out of that first interview was a carefully assembled partial truth constructed to place her in the vicinity while removing her from the center of what happened. She said she had been on her way to Dwight's apartment when 2 unknown young men approached her on the street. She said when she arrived at the complex and they went toward the stairwell together, those same 2 men appeared and attacked Dwight without warning. She said she turned her back. She said she couldn't watch. Investigators let her talk. Her story was already contradicted by the surveillance footage. A young woman who had supposedly witnessed a random savage attack by 2 strangers and had not run, had not screamed, had not called for help. She had simply stood there. And then, buried inside a longer account, she mentioned something she had clearly hoped would pass unexamined. She had handed someone a knife. When asked why she hadn't mentioned this before, she said she was scared. What no investigator in that room could reconcile, and what Christy could not explain, was why, after watching someone she knew being stabbed by strangers, her instinct was not to call 911. It was to hand over a weapon. There were 2 more names inside Christie's account. She offered them almost in passing, describing what happened after she left the stairwell. She said she had run into her boyfriend Andre and a girl named Jacine. She said they had all walked out of the complex together. She said later, by a lake behind Jacine's apartment building, they had burned some old clothes. A bonfire, she said, to cheer her up. The name Andre pulled the investigators' attention immediately. Andre had an ex-girlfriend. A rumor had reached him spreading through the social networks of Miramar High that Dwight Grant had been romantically involved with her. Whether that rumor was accurate, investigators could not confirm. Andre believed it was, and in the days that followed, that belief had not faded. It had organized itself into something else entirely. The third name, Jacine Smith, was 16 years old. She was also in the Miramar High marching band. She was close with Andre. She described him as a mentor figure, someone she looked up to and trusted. When investigators located Jacine at her home, her parents were present. She agreed to speak on her front porch. What came out of that conversation was more direct than anything Christie had offered. Andre had told Jacine that someone had disrespected him, something involving a girl. He said he needed backup for a confrontation. He told her it was going to be a fight. He told her to dress in all black. He told her to follow his lead. Jacine said she didn't think anyone was going to die. Her account was methodical. The group had entered the apartment complex deliberately, with Andre directing her to move in specific ways to avoid certain camera angles, to hold a position. He received a signal from Christie indicating that Dwight was in position in the stairwell. They came down. Jacine described Andre confronting Dwight directly. She said Dwight recognized him immediately. She said Dwight tried to run, and both of them tackled him and pushed him into the corner of the stairwell. And then Jacine said Andre spoke to him. He told Dwight everything he was angry about. He told Dwight what he intended to do about it. Dwight said he didn't have to. He said he would cause no trouble, would stay away, would tell no one anything. He said whatever Andre needed to hear. He pleaded. According to Jacine's account, Christie Parisien, who had been standing on the perimeter, looked at the surrounding parking area, noted the cars and the people nearby, and told Andre to hurry. Investigators now had surveillance footage, 2 partial accounts, and 3 names. What they needed was physical and digital evidence that could stand in a courtroom. The forensic download of Christie Parisien's phone was their first major breakthrough. She had voluntarily provided her passcode at the end of the initial interview, possibly believing there was nothing on the device that could implicate her beyond what she had already admitted. She was wrong. Among the thousands of messages recovered, investigators found a text from Andre Clemens that read, "Murder is going to happen soon." Christie had received it. She had responded. The messages didn't stop there. Between October 1st and October 19th alone, an 18-day window, Andre and Christie had exchanged over 5,000 messages. The content of those messages was explicit and unambiguous. Investigators also received a tip from a concerned parent who had seen text messages circulating among students at Miramar High School in the hours after news of Dwight's body broke. Messages suggesting that someone in the school's social network knew exactly what had happened and was talking about it. That tip further tightened the circle. An anonymous teacher also submitted a photograph to law enforcement, a photo that Andre Clemens had sent to another student. It showed what investigators described as a tactical-style knife set that he had allegedly purchased through Amazon, a large black and red bladed weapon accompanied by 3 smaller dagger-style knives. Authorities have not publicly identified the brand or model of the weapon set. That weapon set matched what Jacine had described being used in the stairwell. It was also consistent with the wounds documented on Dwight's body. DNA analysis returned results that corroborated the physical account. A fragment of a rubber latex glove recovered from the burn site behind Jacine Smith's apartment building returned Jacine's DNA. A gold heart-shaped charm from a matching set of necklaces that Andre and Christy wore as a couple was also recovered at that same burn site. It had fallen off during the destruction of evidence and had not been found before the 3 left. Search warrants at the residences of Christy Parisienne and Jacine Smith produced further evidence. At Christy's home, investigators recovered the boots she had been wearing on the day of the murder. DNA testing confirmed Dwight Grant's blood on those boots. A distinctive orange and pink purse carried by Christy to the crime scene was also recovered. It was later determined to have contained cleaning materials used to attempt to remove evidence from the stairwell following the murder. On the 23rd of October, 2021, less than 1 week after Dwight's body was found, Christy Parisienne and Jacine Smith were taken into custody. Their transport to Miramar Police Department was audio and video recorded. In the back of the patrol car, the 2 teenagers talked about what kind of uniform they might have to wear in juvenile detention. They debated the possibility of light sentences. They asked each other where Andre was, why he hadn't been picked up yet. They had not yet understood what they were facing. Law enforcement attempted to take Andre Clemens into custody the same night. They were unable to locate him. He turned himself in the following morning. He asked to speak with an attorney. He gave no statement. He later asked when he could receive a psychiatric evaluation. All 3 were charged as adults, first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. Take a step back. By the time Dwight Grant died in that stairwell, Andre Clemens had already moved on from the relationship that gave him his supposed motive. He was with someone new. He had a position of social standing at his school. He had people who looked up to him. And he had spent more than a week planning a killing. Forensic behavioral analysts frequently observe that the surface motive in cases like this, jealousy, perceived disrespect, romantic betrayal, is rarely the psychological engine actually driving the violence. It is the trigger. What transforms a grievance into a premeditated killing is a deeper threat, an injury, not to a relationship, but to the sense of self. In individuals whose identity is tightly organized around dominance, control, and social status, a perceived challenge to that standing is not processed as hurt. It is processed as a threat that demands correction. Forensic psychologists refer to this pattern as narcissistic injury, and the response it generates is not proportional to the external event. It is proportional to what the event represents internally. The fact that Andre's grievance rested on a rumor, one that investigators could not confirm was even true, is not incidental to this analysis. It is central. For someone operating from this psychological framework, the factual accuracy of the perceived slight matters less than the perception of it. The feeling of being wronged is what activates the response. And the response, once activated, does not recalibrate based on evidence. There is one moment in Jacine Smith's account that behavioral analysts would identify as particularly significant. After Dwight had been cornered, after he had pleaded, after he had offered every possible exit, promised silence, promised to disappear, asked for nothing but his own life, Andre paused, too. He explained his anger. He told Dwight what was going to happen. And then he proceeded. That pause is not a sign of conflict or hesitation in someone who later changes course. It is in the documented behavioral record of premeditated violence, a signature of control. The actor choosing, in full awareness, to continue. This was not a loss of control. It was control exercised in one of the darkest possible directions. Jacine Smith occupied a distinct third position in this case. She was 16. She had no personal stake in Andre's grievance. Her bond was to Andre himself, a mentor figure, someone older, someone she trusted. When he told her it was going to be a fight, she believed him. Her interview accounts were the most internally consistent of the three, consistent across both sessions, consistent with the physical evidence, consistent with the wound locations on Dwight's body, which she described accurately. Cross-session consistency of this kind is something behavioral analysts regard as an indicator of truthful recall. Fabricated narratives typically degrade across retellings, while remembered events hold their shape. Whether Jacine understood, in those moments in the stairwell, that no one was going to walk away, and at what point that understanding arrived, is something the behavioral evidence cannot fully settle. What it can confirm is that the influence Andre Clemens exercised over both co-defendants extended into the stairwell itself. The pattern of pre-crime communication in this case is also worth examining in its own right. Andre Clemens sent a text that said, "Murder is going to happen soon." His ex-girlfriend, aware of his intentions, confronted him about it directly. He told her not to ask. An anonymous teacher submitted a photograph of the weapons he had publicly shared with a student. The information was there in text messages, in photographs, in conversations. No one intervened in time. That absence is not a footnote to this case. It is one of the things the case leaves behind, a documented instance of announced violence that was witnessed and not stopped. In August 2024, Christy Parisien and Jacine Smith accepted plea agreements. Both pleaded guilty to murder in the second degree. Both were sentenced to 25 years in Florida State Prison. Andre Clemens had chosen to go to trial. On the eve of jury selection, his attorneys approached the prosecution. Under Florida law, the family of a homicide victim holds specific rights regarding any proposed resolution to the case. The prosecution consulted with Mageline Emile and Dwight Grant Sr. They chose to extend what the lead prosecutor later described as grace. Andre Clemens was convicted of murder in the first degree. He was sentenced to 40 years in Florida State Prison, to be followed by lifetime probation. At sentencing, Mageline Emile stood in that courtroom and delivered a victim impact statement. She said her son would never walk beside her again, that she would never hear his voice, that every version of the future she had imagined seeing him graduate, watching him pursue what he loved, growing older, knowing he was out there somewhere in the world, had been removed from her. The judge presiding over the case, Judge Ernest Coulra, was visibly affected. He said from the bench that what he could not reconcile was the escalation, a rumor passed between teenagers. The most minor kind of social slight, and someone had determined that the appropriate response was death. Dwight D.J. Grant Jr. was 18 years old. He called his family every night. He loved computers and video games and had a plan for his future. He was the kind of person that everyone who met him described the same way: kind, funny, an old soul. Someone who made the people around him better just by being present. 4 families are permanently altered. 3 people will spend decades in Florida's prison system. 1 young man never found out what kind of adult he would become. All of it traces back to a decision made by a 17-year-old who typed out, "Murder is going to happen soon," and pressed send, who announced his intentions in writing, who shared it with people, who bought the weapons and photographed them and sent those photographs to others. The warnings were there. So is the question that remains. How many times does someone announce what they're about to do before someone stops them? Cases like Dwight's remind us that behind every headline is a life that existed fully, completely, right up until someone decided it shouldn't. If that thought stays with you, it should. Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. And if the Malice Mind is where you come to understand the darkest corners of the human mind, subscribe.